Hello and welcome to The Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. I'm George Szamuely. With me today, of course, is co-founder of The Gaggle, Buddy, and his friend,
Sidekick.
who is also employed at RT's talk show, Crosstalk. All right, Peter, so it's been a little more than 2 weeks since the Geneva summit between Presidents Biden and Putin. And it's almost as if nothing very much has changed. The National Security Agency, the FBI, and GCHQ from the United Kingdom has just published a report, the title of which is Russian GRU Conducting Global Brute Force Campaign to Compromise Enterprise and Cloud Environments. And the thrust of this is that—
Good title.
Very good title. The thrust of this report is that since 2019, all the way through to today, the GRU has conducted widespread brute force access attempt against hundreds of government and private sector targets worldwide. And this malicious cyber activity has previously been attributed to the private sector, and this goes back to all the Fancy Bear, the AP228, and all that stuff that we remember from Russiagate. But this is being used all over the world, and this is the governments, private entities, universities, think tanks. Everybody's in danger from this Russian operation. Now, Russia famously at this Geneva summit said, hey, well, most of the attacks on targets around the world emanate from the United States. We complain far more to the United States about cyber attacks on us than the United States complains to us about cyber attacks emanating from Russia. So that, but nonetheless, if we look at the New York Times report on this, and see how they describe it. And he said, the New York Times, well, this is written by the national security guy, David Sanger. Whether these ransomware attacks abate will be the first test of whether Mr. Biden's message to Mr. Putin at Geneva has sunk in. There, Mr. Biden handed him a list of 16 areas of critical infrastructure in the United States that the United States would not tolerate it continued. So we'll have to see whether Putin has learned his the lesson. And he says here, this message is unlikely to matter to Mr. Putin or the GRU as they attempt to assess the steps the Biden administration is willing to take to curb their cyber campaigns and in what order. Interestingly enough, the Times asserts something as factual that is very definitely not factual, when they're saying at the time of the attacks on the election systems in 2016, election systems including voting machines and registration systems, this was the American intelligence agencies said that Mr. Putin had directed these attacks. There were no attacks on voting systems. And, Times just makes these things up, complete lies. And it just
well, can I use a popular term? That has been debunked. It's been debunked exactly, a long time ago.
Exactly. There were no attacks on voting system, but the Times just said that because they're still wedded to the idea that the 2016 election was stolen by Russia for President Trump. Now, what does all this mean? It sounds to me like Russia may well be, the Russian government may well be engaged in espionage operations. Well, are we to assume that the United States is not engaged in espionage operations against Russia? That seems to be quite a big assumption, because if it isn't engaged in espionage operations, then what the hell is the United States doing paying all these alphabet soup agencies, the NSA and the Defense Intelligence Agency and all the rest, if they're not spying? I mean, that's what intelligence agencies are supposed to do. They're supposed to spy. And remember all the talk about this week we've had about Tucker Carlson, the NSA does not spy on Americans. Instead, it spies on our adversaries. So it seems to me everyone has always assumed that the NSA spies on others. So why is everyone getting indignant if the Russians are indeed spying? And I don't know whether they are.
It's interesting, the NSA and all the other alphabet soup organizations. I mean, they want to tell us what everybody else is doing, but they never tell us what they're doing.
Right,
okay.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think it's something that you assume as I'm breathing air, talking to you, is that they're doing it all over the world, nonstop, all the time. Okay, that's what they're paid to do.
Right.
Okay?
And what the hell are all those satellites doing up in the air if they're not spying?
Well, I mean, they're coming up with the budget, George. Okay?
Right.
They're waving a flag. Okay,
right.
There's a great threat out there. We need more money. Okay,
right.
Which have kind of one thing that kind of muddies their waters is just exactly the Tucker Carlson story. Is that as the country is so divided, so you need more resources to spy on our fellow Americans. Is that what you want? And which is part of the debate, obviously. Right. Of course, you have no recourse because they won't give you an answer. It's like talking to Google; they won't answer you. Okay, right. But I mean, it also begs the question, and it's something that I think about a lot, is that a great deal of the infrastructure in the United States is defenseless. Okay, I mean, when you have this like solar winds, I mean, there was an intern that worked there that got passwords to get into what the back end of it, and he put that on the internet. Okay, and so lo and behold, somebody probably used it. Okay, I mean, I may be wrong about this, but intelligence services are not usually in the business of ransoms. Okay, I mean, intelligence services, what they do is and if they're good, is they get into systems and they stay in systems, and you never know about it because the gift that keeps on giving. I mean, it's people, just criminals. They want a payday. If you're Israeli or Turkish, Iranian, Russian, Chinese, you get into a system and you sit tight and you watch what's going on. You don't make yourself known.
Yeah, well, that's the whole point. And that's why these reports, like this one from the NSA and the GCHQ, and the sort of slavish New York Times write-ups, they always confuse all these different issues, which is you can have espionage operations conducted by governments. You have these ransomware attacks, which sounds like they're just conducted by criminal gangs. You can have people, just random hackers all over the world. And you can have just hacking, which is little more than kind of terrorism, which is when you just hack somebody's I don't know, nuclear power station and cause an enormous catastrophic consequences. So all of these things are always mucked up and just said, oh, Russia. But eventually, you've got to separate all of these issues out, and they never do that. And so that's why it always sounds like, Russia's culpable for everything. But what's interesting is they published this report 2 weeks after this meeting in Geneva. It's directed at Russia. It is extremely hostile and doesn't seem to be in the spirit of collegiality and cooperativeness that we were led to expect is now going to be the new norm.
This is obviously directed against Russia, but who else is it directed against, George? I think the sitting president of the United States may start having just a smidgen of sympathy for the man that was in office before. Okay, don't you? We've seen this film before, haven't we, George? Okay,
exactly. Yes, that's right. And of course,
the Vindmans, the revenge of the Vindmans.
Right. And of course, if you have a longer historical memory, remember the spirit of Camp David when Nikita Khrushchev visited America, visited Eisenhower, and again we seem to have good relations would be ahead the United States and the Soviet Union.
And then
you have the U-2 spy flights, and it's clear Eisenhower did not authorize those U-2 spy flights, and Khrushchev absolutely, blew
Sir.
the top when he found out about that. He shot down the U-2 plane, and of course then relations between the U.S. and the USSR, went to the toilet. But as you say, it's something that we've seen before. We're about to embark on an improvement of relations, and lo and behold, the intelligence or the military, cook up something.
All gagglers here will see George and I just did right before this one episode on China, which ended up being a bit contentious, but very, very interesting. Yep. So, I mean, I can imagine Biden up in the basement in Delaware saying, but I thought we were doing China. I thought we were doing China. Come on, you guys, let's get on the script here. Let's everybody be on the same page, okay?
But it is an interesting issue, exactly, because there are people who will say, "Hey, China is the focus," and then no, forget China, Russia is the focus.
And then there's another. But I thought we were trying to, break them apart.
Right, exactly.
I bet that that would be a very interesting campfire of all these people. Right. I thought it was Russia. No, I thought it was China. Oh, I thought we were trying to break them apart.
Right. Yes, and of course.
And then Blinken will say, "I think we have to weigh the relative racism here of each one of these policies." And that's when somebody douses the fire and say, "Let's just go to bed."
Right. No, that's right. But it is kind of interesting because, since the issue of cyber war was addressed in Geneva, and they said we were going to cooperate on this, and this is something Russians have been talking about for a long time, that these issues need to be discussed, the threats of cyber war and so on, and what is the New York Times spin? The New York Times spin is, Russia is so terrible, and Biden laid the law down to Putin. Now it's a question of whether, will Putin heed Biden's words? And the Times, no. He's a former KGB man. He will not heed Biden's words.
We really need to dispense with a lot of myths. The Soviet Union and now Russia has a good record, not a sterling one, but a good record of keeping their agreements. Yep. Okay, yep. Let's talk about the anti-missile ABM treaty. When it was coming together, the Western intelligence found out that the Russians got something going on here. Okay, they got caught. Yep, and they said, okay, yep. Meaning they found value in that treaty, and they were willing to change what they were doing. Okay, and also with this is that if there's a commitment, and people mock the 17 sectors and all that, I don't see the point in mocking it. It's showing what's important. You know what that does? It gives the American government, the Russian government, and other countries that would agree to this kind of convention, as they would police their own a lot more closely, saying, you're going to get us into a real mess. Now you knock it off. Yep. Okay, because I think just the vast majority of it is the freelancers that you're pointing out. I mean, people that do it for money, people do it for terrorism. I mean, let's lift the uranium rods out of this nuclear plant and see what happens. Okay, I mean, there are unfortunately elements like that out there, and I just really want to stress that intelligence agencies, their whole job is not to be caught. Okay, you have to think about it in the way they're performing their craft. The craft is not to, let's make everybody blame us and show us how incompetent we are. See, that's not the way it works. It's very counterintuitive. And that New York Times, just the usual garbage from the New York Times. I mean, geez.
Yeah, bringing up this nonsense about the voting systems, which, as you say, were repeatedly debunked. The whole. But this is really the point, that all of these things that they're assuming that the Russians are doing, it's kind of a projection. They say, they're breaking into think tanks. Why would they need to do that? I mean, think tanks publish papers. They're out in the public. I mean, when we look at the AEI or the CSIS. What's the mystery there? Why would the Russians need to hack into the AEI when the AEI just churns out all these papers all the time?
In the area, particularly of foreign policy, what do these think tanks do? They're just rewriting what Qatar wants, Saudi Arabia wants, Israel wants, Turkey wants. I mean, it's a recycling operation, okay? And they put the veneer of think tank on front of it, okay? No, that's what they do. I mean, there's no real, I don't see any value.
There's no exactly. There's no thinking going on. I mean, but that's
no thinking.
There's no thinking. But in any case, it's all out in the public. I mean, you turn on C-SPAN. I mean, if you have a taste for it, and there is some kind of a conference going on organized by the CSIS, and the same boring talking heads spout the same boring talking points. Why would the Russians need to spy on this? I mean, that doesn't seem to make any sense. But it may be that someone or other has hacked into the thing.
Well, what he could do is just maybe get a subscription and just have it mailed to you.
That's right. I don't want to pay for a subscription. I think I'll hack into it. Which could well happen. It could well be.
Maybe
they don't want to pay the damn fees. I mean,
no, but it's really imperative that we work towards some kind of cyber understanding treaty around the world. I mean, I think, and actually, again, counterintuitively, if the Americans feel that they're on the short end of the stick of this here, then they should be much more forthcoming here.
Right.
And I mean, it's we had during the Cold War, during the Reagan administration, where they hacked in to and this is very primitive in those days, but electronically, destroying a pipeline in the Soviet Union. Look at what they did to the nuclear program in Iran. I mean, that was a really toxic attack that got loose, very much like a virus, and got into the world. Okay,
but that's a serious business, and you really don't want to go down that path, particularly against someone who we assume the Russians are pretty skilled at cyber war themselves. So if you start, get into some lab and let off an explosion in the lab, or maybe, as you say, let an escape of a virus, they're going to retaliate. And that's when you get into a very dangerous area. But you made a very good point about this Russians sticking to agreements, and that's something that the United States does, and the West particularly, does not like to do. And that's what's so strange, because let's say you have a case. You say, okay, the Russians are violating the agreement on this and this and this. Well, then why can't you just go to them and say, hey, you're violating, and it could be just simply a mistake. I mean, they whatever. There are mechanisms. I mean, all these agreements had mechanisms in place for addressing grievances by one or other party. That's the whole point, that if one or other party thinks that the other is actually violating the terms of the agreement, you have a mechanism in place to address that grievance. But instead, you say, no, we're walking away. We don't want to have anything to do with it.
Example, ICBMs, and then they became MIRVs, where they had multiple. Yes. I mean, and that was a really huge problem. And they had to sit down and say, this is how we're going to identify it, and prove it. Open skies, which we don't have anymore. There were a lot of things that it's basically building trust. And really, what it is tit for tat, tit for tat, tit for, and it's long, it's tedious, that you build trust. See, this New York Times article, they don't want to build trust. They want to build mistrust.
They want to build mistrust. Their premise is, America is completely in the right, doesn't do anything wrong. Russia is a malignant, malevolent, mischievous power. And, good old Joe is trying to get them to behave. The question now is, will Russia behave? Nope, I don't think so. Putin's an old KGB hand. They don't behave.
After this article, there were 100,000 premium subscriptions to New York Times purchased in China.
Yeah.
I bet the Chinese come up with a foreign journalist awards, and all in the praise of China, and the New York Times will win every single time.
That's it.
Everyone. I'm not trying to pick fights. I'm not trying to pick sides here. I'm just saying that people are blind to what's happening geopolitically because of their ideology.
Right.
You know, you can't let it go. Because if you don't let Russiagate go, then you're vindicating Trump. That is a child's way of thinking.
Right.
You know, I mean, can't you just be honest and say, yeah, it worked, Russiagate worked. We got rid of China, we got rid of Trump, and you know, COVID didn't hurt, okay? But that was that gambit. It worked, okay? Now refocus on the world as it is.
Yeah. No, unable to do so. And here, you know, there are clearly very powerful forces embedded within the U.S. government that are absolutely obsessed with Russia. And they're not just going to allow Biden or, you know, to go his path and say, well, you know, let's go back to the days of, you know, of détente, or, you know, Biden, who seems to be under the impression that, you know, Russia's under enormous pressure from China, and then Russia wants to come over to our side. And so, you know, but even if, you know, Biden is under this delusion, you can be sure there are people within the apparat who will not allow anything like that to.
Remember that it's a very, very famous picture when the East Germans started building the Berlin Wall, and there's that picture of that soldier that throws his gun and he's like making a run to make it to the west. You know, that's supposed to be in the eyes of, you know, the environment. That's Russia. They're trying to escape the Chinese.
Yes.
I mean, this is delusional thinking. Delusion.
Completely delusional. It was amazing that he kind of blurted this out. Somebody must have put this notion into his head.
Gave him a card.
Enormous pressure from China. But yeah, and I'm sure that, you know, the people who think this, and this was the rationale behind this meeting in Geneva. But you know, it really didn't last very long, and then we already had that caper last week in Crimea, in which the U.S. military was involved. So clearly, you know, there are people who are absolutely determined that there is to be no rapprochement between the U.S. and Russia.
Yes, it's Vindman's revenge.
The Vindman types, yes.
He's in some basement someplace, you know, you can see all the monitors and all the computers, okay? You know, he's running, he's the apparat, okay?
Yeah.
But, you know, on a serious note, we can end up here is that, as you know, as we have the afterglow from the summit, it looks like still another American president just isn't in control of his foreign policy.
No, I think so.
I mean, as long as he says, you know, bomb Iraq or bomb Syria, they'll, oh yeah, sure, no problem. We got that done. We got, you know, they've already prepared for that. But when it goes against the grain, what was it? The interagency consensus.
That's the Vindman. Yeah, Vindman coined that term. Yeah, the interagency consensus. Yeah, no, I think that's right. And that seems to be the everything that we have done since then. Remember the announcement, oh, new sanctions are coming over Navalny. Then we had the Crimea. Now we have this sudden report. This didn't come from the White House. This is clearly, you know, within the intelligence agencies that came up with this report. You know, you see that the apparat will not tolerate any kind of rapprochement. So the Geneva meeting increasingly just looks like a dud. I mean, it was an event of no meaning at all.
Yeah. All righty.
Where can we be found?
Still again, we end on a depressing note. We're on locals right now, so go to thegaggle.locals.com. As I say almost every single time now, George and I are doing one-on-ones via Zoom with gagglers. Keep in mind the time differences, that we're in different time zones. And we'd love to talk to you. It's turning into a very interesting enterprise. Yep. Also, any kind of help you'd like to show your generosity, we have a tip jar.
Very appreciative.
I'm not gonna parade, buddy.
And a gaggle store that will soon be open for business. So, you know, please patronize the store. You know, we have great mugs, t-shirts, sweatshirts. You know, hats, all sorts of good
stickers too.
Stickers, exactly, and you know, whatever you could purchase will be enormous help to us. We're also on Rumble. Look us up on Rumble, and remember, if you like the gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.